Now, let's start talking about the string data type. The very first thing you need to know is how to create a string. If you've watched this series up until now, it should be pretty simple. Something like this. And you should also notice that we don't have to say new string, although that is possible. So I could say new string, and then inside of these parentheses pass a string literal like hey, for example. Java has just made our life a little bit more convenient in that we don't have to do this here. That's not always going to be the case when working with objects, but strings are one of the exceptions where they just make our life a little bit easier and we can just keep it simple like this. So in this scenario, the constructor method is going to be called behind the scenes. It's going to work exactly the same way. And we can work with X just like we would if we said new string and put the value hello. So what you need to notice is that string is actually started with a capital letter. That is in contrast to the primitive values like int or double. And that is because we're not creating a primitive value. String is not a primitive, it is a class. So what we're doing is we're making an object, an instance of a class. It's fundamentally different than a primitive type, but in general, working with the variable works similarly. So string is similar to integer in that there's static methods as well as instance methods, where anything called on the variable is an instance method because we have to create an instance of string, also known as an object, and then the statics are called directly on the string class itself. Now, when you create a string, you're going to use double quotes. Some other languages allow you to use single quotes, like so, and this is not going to work in Java. When we use single quotes, we're actually saying that this is a different data type. The single quotes are reserved for characters, and a character is only one of these letters, not all of them. So H is a character, but even still, we can't go and assign that to a string automatically. So languages like JavaScript or SQL might allow you to use the single quotes, but in Java, you're not going to be able to do that. So I'm just going to get rid of that. You can work with the individual characters of this string, and in order to do that, you need a special method. In order to do that, you need a special method, which is char@. And then you pass in an index. The index starts at 0, so this character has the index 0, this one 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So if we pass in the value 0, we should get H. And let's just sys out this to prove it right there. So let's run it and we get the value H. Awesome. Now, if you go out of the bounds of the array, you get an issue. You can see that when we run this, we get an exception, which means there was an error while we were running our program. So this is a runtime error and it says string index out of bounds exception. So later on, we'll talk about how we handle exceptions. But for now, just know that you shouldn't do that. This also just kind of shows the strictness of a language like Java. This is unlike something like JavaScript. If you go out of the bounds of a string in JavaScript, well, it's just going to give you the value undefined and nothing's going to happen. Now, inside of a string, you can have special characters. So for example, one special character is a \n. Let's run this. Actually, let's put a couple of them here. And then we'll say cats. I don't know. And then we're going to output this and run it. And we get hello, and then we get a new line, another new line, another new line, and then the value cats. Because each one of these \n's is a special character that gets rendered as a new line, or think of it as the equivalent of pressing enter. Here are some of the other special characters you can use. The one we just did was new line, but you can do similar stuff such as rendering a backspace or a tab or a \/ itself. The reason we need this \/ one is because when we use a \, it's assuming we're going to use a special character, but we're not. So in order to say, hey man, we don't want to use a special character, we need to escape that \/ by using 2 backslashes. So now it knows we just want to print 1 \. So that's pretty cool. Hello cats. The next thing I wanted to talk about is how you can concatenate strings. So if you're outputting something, you can put strings in here like X, and you can use the plus sign, which is going to concatenate 2 strings. And concatenate just means combining one string with another string. So I could say and dogs. And I'm just going to put a space here and just kind of clean this up just a little bit. So let's run this, and it says hello cats and dogs. This one is just printing the original value. Don't worry about that. And the important thing to know here is that this concatenation does not affect the variable X. If we were to do something like X plus equals and puppies, well now, what we should get when we output this, we should get hello cats and puppies, because this is actually going to change the variable x. So let's run this, and we get hello cats and puppies. So that is in the variable. The one hello cats and dogs is not actually changing the variable. The only thing that's happening is we're creating a new string here, and that string is getting passed into print line. X is not affected. This system of concatenation with this plus operator does work for some scenarios, but there's actually another way you can do this, and which one you prefer is totally up to you. The other way is to use string.format, which will allow you to kind of templatize your string and fill in variables in different spots. So to do string.format, you just say string.format, and then in here you pass a string which defines that format. So for example, I could say hello %s, and then this %s is going to be another variable. So let me just clean this up a little bit. So we're going to say we have a string name and set that equal to Caleb. And then what we can do is we can fill in the variable Caleb to this %s by saying name like that. All right, and then what we need to do is we need to print this thing like so, and then run it. Okay, I got an error. Oh, I got a little bit too many curly braces there. I was scrolled over so I didn't see them, and I thought I deleted them, but they were just sitting there. All right, let's run this. All right, and you can see it says hello Caleb. So that's the basics of the string.format. It can get a little bit more complicated though, so if you really want to know, just look up string.format if you're trying to make some more complex strings. Which way to do it is totally up to you. The last thing I wanted to mention to you guys is just how to get the length of a string. So for example, if I do name.length, and this is a method, it's going to return an int of how many characters is in this string. So if we're getting name.length, it should return 5. Let's just output it and see if that's what we get. And you can see we get the value 5. Awesome, so that will come in real handy when you need to tell people how many letters their names have. No, but seriously, later on we'll probably use something similar to this when we want to basically indicate how long a string is so we don't go past it. So we could say, hey dude, the length of the string is 5, so you don't want to go past the index 4 in the characters, else you're going to go outside of the bounds of the string, and the computer's going to explode, everyone's going to die, and it's going to be really bad. So definitely know that length exists. We're not going to use it for right now, but it might come up in the future. It's definitely a very common method, and you'll definitely want to know how to use it. In Java, this is a method. In some other programming languages, it's just a property which would just be accessed without those parentheses. But just a side note, you're going to want to keep those parentheses there. So those are the basics of strings.